So, but welcome to a worship conversation, everybody that's tuning in. It gives me great honor, great privilege to introduce these wonderful individuals who have agreed to join me this week. We are going to be talking about youth, young adult worship as it relates to recognizing callings on your life, giftings on your life as a child. And so we're going to dive in. We're going to share some of our personal stories because we've all started pretty young, right? Like teenage, we all started pretty young. So we're going to talk about that. We're also going to share some encouragement and some hope for you. You might be a worship leader who deal with worship youngsters, or you might be in the position where you're leading young people or children, and we want to be able to give you some pointers and some insight on how to navigate through that. Or you might be that teenager, or you might be that young adult who's fresh out of high school, or leading in your youth band, your praise band at church, or singing in a youth choir. Like how to navigate in times like this, how to navigate when it's time to select music, or what does this mean for me? I'm a child, and do I have to have a calling on my life, and all those things. So we're going to talk about all of those. And I first want to introduce these wonderful people. Some of you guys know them, some of you guys do not. I see people logging in. We got people from across the waters. Wow. Somebody from Ghana's here. Somebody from South Africa is here. Good to see you all. Why don't you go ahead and just type where you're from. Just give us a shout out. Tell us your name, where you're from. Thank you. Well, we see your name already, but just tell us where you're from. So first, I want to introduce Miss LaShaunda Hoskins. She's a great friend, great worship leader. I've known her for years. It's been a while.
All right.
We've served in multiple events together, multiple capacities in ministry. So thank you, LaShaunda, for being here. You're such a blessing, and I'm sure that you're going to bless so many today. Let's give her a hand. Next, I want to introduce my God sister, Miss Allayah LaShaunda. She's a wonderful worship leader as well, worship leader in the making. I have the opportunity of serving her at Grace for the Nations Church, where she assists with our youth choir. I used to be over the youth choir, and I turned over the reins. I think I kind of voluntold her into that position. Maybe we'll talk about that a little bit. But,
I got
that position, I wasn't sure if she wanted it or not, but I was like, here, it's yours. And so, but she's taking it to another level. And so welcome, Leah. Thank you for agreeing to come. And then my brother from another mother, and it's no happenstance that our screens are right next to each other, because we are like twins. Everybody think we're twins. Everywhere we go, people say they think we're twin brothers. So, Jalen Bell leads at. I'll let him share where he leads, and well, I already shared Leah. So he leads at Lansing Kojic, Lansing Church of God in Christ, and so I had the opportunity to take my Calvin students to their youth service like 3-4 weeks ago. Yep. They did a phenomenal job. So it's always a blessing to see him lead youth and young adults and go forth. And I see the discipleship. I see the empowerment happening there. So Jalen Bell, everyone, thank you so much, Jalen, for being here. And yeah, how y'all doing?
Good.
I'm good. How y'all maintaining during this quarantine?
Good. Hanging in there. Doing well.
I'm taking it a day at a time.
Right.
Wearing my mask.
A little bit. It's been all right. Right. I'm good.
Real quick, I was thinking about, and this is so random. Just randomly thought about this John P. Key, Hezekiah Walker battle this past Sunday. Did any of you guys watch that?
Definitely.
I didn't.
Of course, they didn't watch it, but Jalen.
I was jamming all night. Every song that came on.
I was thinking about the music that was playing. Is like 90% of those songs, like youth choirs all over the world was singing them. Everybody was singing those songs. And so I don't know why I thought about that, but maybe we can kind of segue into what are some of the, maybe one youth choir song or youth worship team song that you can think of, whether it's from past or kind of present. Like what's one song when you think of youth choirs, praise band, youth bands, whatever, what's one song that kind of sticks out to you? Leah, you go first.
Well, not saying you guys are old or anything, but I didn't grow up in
Right.
that era of like when I was in the youth choir, Ty Tribbett's Greater Than had came out. So,
Yeah.
and that's what we were singing. But there's one specific song that I remember. I don't know the name of it, but it's "Can't You See the Clouds Gathering?" That one. That just really reminds me, and that's what I think of. When I think of youth choirs. Yeah.
It's a good song. Go ahead, Shonda.
I, like Leia, was also in youth choir when Ty Tribbett came out. Or what's the song you said? I'm kidding. I'm a little older. But one song that stands out is what is it? I can't think of the name of it, but we praise you, oh Lord.
Oh yeah, Joshua.
That
song. Go ahead, Jalen.
Man, I was definitely in youth choir in the 90s was my jam. Youth choir. A song that we did a lot was actually Kirk Franklin. Just Our God is an Awesome God. Our God is an awesome God. Stuff like that. We used to tear up. We loved Stump. When Stump came out, that was like a huge deal in the gospel realm. So we did that a couple times, but that was like more of our style of music.
That's a good one. You guys remember Walt Whitman and the Soul Children of Chicago?
Huh?
I've heard the name, but I would have to hear the song.
Okay.
What's the song?
Hallelujah. Barack.
Okay. That's what we also did a lot.
He didn't sing it, but I know that song.
Y'all didn't know the name, but yeah.
What's their name? What's their name again?
Well, the director's name is Walt Whitman, and the children is that's right, Shantae. The choir was the Soul Children of Chicago.
All right.
People were like
choir name
10, 11, 12 years old, just like jamming and YouTube them.
You wore that song out.
Yeah, we wore it out too. Dance moves and everything. Dun, 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 dun.
That's funny.
What's up, Pastor Timber, all the way from South Africa?
Yo.
Dante Liggins from the East Side. We're praying for you guys.
Shout out, Pastor T.
Brother Keith from Chicago. Qin from South Africa.
Qin, I remember you.
Word from Muskegon. Jeremiah.
Yeah.
He goes to Jalen's church. I don't want to keep calling names, then I'll get in trouble. But when did you guys start? I guess leading worship is probably the most popular term now. I used to think the term worship leading was, of course, the person who was in charge of the praise team. And when I started leading worship at Grace and furthering in my ministry, I started calling everyone. We're all worship leaders, from musicians to the singers to the background to the choir. Whoever Sunday is up to lead, you have become the worship leader, including the youth and the children. From the smallest, however old the youngest child singing at our church, I let them know. Is it Allayah? I think Allayah, you are a worship leader today. And so talk about, when did you guys start? If you can remember, what was the age that you started like leading or singing in the church, or leading worship in the church? And maybe like your first experience, if you can just sum that up real quick. Jalen, you can go first.
Sure. So I would say that I began, well, let me back up. So at my church, we had like a small church in Albion. It was probably 100, maybe to 125 people total in the church. And my mom was the praise and worship leader at my church. Like, she did all the music. So I was like almost forced to sing, from early on. I remember leading probably when I was 6 or 7 years old. And I used to have this really high soprano voice. Like, I sang nothing but soprano when I was a little kid. My first song I led was Jesus Excellent, I'm pretty sure. Oh Lord, how excellent. That's like the very first song I've ever led. And that was probably at like 7 years old, I would say. And my mom kind of grew me early on to be in front of people and singing, because she was the praise and worship leader. So I was always like singing tenor. Like, my mom always had me out front with her singing and leading. And that's when I just kind of grew comfortable being in front of people, and I didn't really have like a lot of nerves and stuff like that growing up because I was doing it every Sunday, and like in the youth choir, and then just being up there with her singing. So that's probably my earliest experience, I would say, at about 7 or 8 years old.
Okay. What about you, Leah?
Okay, so I remember being a kid with my robe and being in the choir, but I didn't really, I didn't really know what was happening. I kind of was just doing it, or because my parents said, "Hey, you got to do this," and just for like the fun aspect of it. Oh, we get candy after rehearsal, and waves of mercy, all that. So, and then I stopped doing that, and then I got into the youth choir. I'll say probably about 10th grade. That means I was about 15, I think, at the time, 15, 16. And then it was like, oh, okay, this is what this is, So, and even then I wasn't really singing for real. It was also just for the fun aspect. Oh, my friends are here. These are the same people I'm in school with. I see them every day. Why not be in the choir? So that's kind of what that was. And then I got forced to lead Now Behold the Lamb. So that was like my first experience. And and then I moved up to, I don't know if I mentioned it before, but I'm from the east side of the state. So then I moved up here for college in 2014, and then the rest is history. I think I've been leading at Grace for, was it 3 years now, Nate?
Yeah, about
Something
3 years.
like yeah, so yeah, that's pretty much.
So it sounds like you two have been at this since children, like nonstop.
Yeah, for the most part for me, yeah.
I think that's what we all have in common. Go ahead, Shonda.
Now, I was gonna say, do you guys know the song, Children, Children, Jesus loves the children?
Yes, I've heard that song.
I was 5 in our children's choir.
Nice.
And we still have like the tape recording of that.
All right.
I remember that was the first song I led. And then I also led His Eye is on the Sparrow. Is that what it's called? What's the name of the song? His Eye is on the Sparrow in the children's choir. And then, like I said, since 5, just kind of being, and not even willingly singing, but just kind of forced out there. Shonda will do it. Shonda will sing it. So that is the earliest memory. And then my father started our ministry when I was 12, I think. And as soon as we started, I was on the praise team right away. It was my brother, my sister-in-law, and 2 other people. I can't remember who else it was, but just kind of, again, being forced to be there because I was there. So kind of being forced to be a part, but it came to grow naturally and got a little more comfortable the older I got. But like I said, being 5 and then 12, always forced. But now I love doing it. It's no longer a force.
Right.
But since I started, it was just kind of a forced thing because I was there.
I think for me, I was 8 years old. I do know I was 8, and I was always fascinated with music, and so I was one of those kids who sat on the front row like this the whole time, the whole service, and never fell asleep in church. But I was always inquisitive of what was happening in the music pit. And then I asked my mom to buy me a piano, and actually asked to buy a guitar first. And like I had the thing for like a week, tore it up. I had little Hot Wheel cars going into the head of it, and just it was a mess. And then they eventually bought me a piano or keyboard, and I was playing that. And everything I heard on TV, whether it was the Oprah Winfrey theme music or the TV Guide music. I remember the TV Guide used to come on the channel. No.
Yep. Absolutely do.
To play the music, and my mom told our minister of music at the time, my son he plays music. And so long story short, the opportunity came, and I remember it was a Sunday night service, and they put me up. It was like a high praise service, and it was I don't know what. I remember being 8, and they called me up, and I just remember like, no, just like crying, resisting and everything. And my mom kept saying, do you want the Lord to bless you? Do you believe that there's a calling on your life? And I was like, I don't know. And the whole church is seeing me giving my mom a hard time about getting up there to play. I don't know what happened. I don't know if she promised me $1. It was so long ago or something, but I ended up up there playing, and in the black church, everybody was just boogity 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 boogity, So, but the rest is history. So, and I said that to say, because I want to segue into the next part. One thing that my mom said to me was, "Do you believe you're called to this?" And I remember being a child and not knowing what that meant. Kind of like, am I called to this? Is this a calling? And I think all of you said, or Leah and Shaunda said, about that feeling of being kind of forced to do it, or did you really want to do it? And I remember being like 8, 9, 10, in the middle of both, kind of like, I believe God wants me to do this. First, I need to know more about God too, but I kind of feel like I'm supposed to do this. But then I'm also kind of like, they just want me here because nobody else can do it, or they need this void filled. Was there ever a point at your young age where it clicked for you, where you're kind of like, I'm supposed to be doing that? Or did that come like later?
That didn't hit me until about 4 years ago. So that was college years at that time. So
you want to expound on this some more?
I didn't really, I guess, no slam on the church I'm from, but I didn't really know. I didn't really understand worship or just callings and things like that. I also didn't see when I heard of calling, it was always prophet and preacher. So it wasn't always worship leader. So, and that's just my knowledge of it. And so I didn't think too deep into it. It was just like, oh, you can sing, you sound straight. And it always felt like a talent thing more so. So that's kind of how I had viewed it at the time. But then as I got older, I began to experience it kind of for myself, and even just being in the congregation, not necessarily leading at the time, just being in the congregation and experiencing worship, and then getting to a place where I was able to lead others into that place. That's kind of where it kind of clicked for me. So once I began to understand it, and understand where I fit in there and the manifestation that it produced, that's kind of where it clicked for me. And like I said, that was about 3-4 years ago.
Okay.
I would say kind of similar. It wasn't until I got to maybe my freshman year in college that I really started developing like a personal relationship with God. And my background, my history, my family is amazing. So my foundation is already amazing, but it was just always just kind of what I heard. But it wasn't until I moved to campus and away from my family, and I had to be here by myself and kind of create an environment of worship by myself, that I realized I needed to develop a relationship with him. So until then, it was just always kind of feelings of, I guess, inadequacy too. Still, sometimes I feel inadequate, but even then it was more of a greater feeling of inadequacy, only because I didn't know the seriousness and the, I guess, the effect that it had once I accepted the calling, the effect that it would have on kingdom. So again, very similar to what Allayah said.
Okay. That's good. For me, I would say it started a little bit earlier. For me, probably around my freshman year in high school, probably like the 8th grade, summer into freshman year in high school. That was around the time, so I'm like 14 years old or so. That's when I really started to discover that I had a passion for not only just singing, but also for like leading and worship and stuff like that. Because I was at that time, like I grew up on a lot of Men of Standard and Commission and, Smokey Norfolk and all these people. And I was always mimicking like how they sounded, like how they directed their choirs and stuff like that. And I started to like develop my own, taste and passion for music as a whole and just leading. And because my mom had kind of pushed me out front for so many years, it just kind of became like a natural thing for me. But I would say that I really felt like I was called to do, or at least called to sing, rather, and kind of lead, probably around 14 years old or so.
Okay. So we'll stay with Jalen. So tell us a little bit about the youth at your church and kind of what's the what's the vibe like at Interest Lansing Kojic with your youth? Give us kind of a synopsis of what is it like leading that group.
So the kids at El Kojic, the youth choir, the ages are like 12 or 13 to like 24 or so for the youth choir. They're highly energetic. All the time, like they're like balls of energy. When we be in rehearsal, like they love music that's energetic and that's gonna get them their energy and blood pumping. But at the same time, they're actually well grounded, I would say, to be so young. Like when I go to the back and we have like youth service, youth church, and we're going through the word and stuff like that. I think the kids nowadays, they deal, and I feel like it can be said for like every single generation. We deal with problems that y'all didn't have to deal with, and it's kind of cliche, but really the kids now are maturing, I think, at rapid pace sometimes, and like some of the things that they say and mention, you're like, like I'm surprised that you have that much depth to be 14 or 15 years old. But they're really energetic. We love to have a lot of fun. I wish I could, do more like fun activities with them, like bowling parties or going skating or to the movies or stuff like that. But we have a lot of fun on Youth Sunday. Youth Sunday is probably like the best Sunday. Well, I always say it's the best. I always say it's the best Sunday of the month because everybody's parents and stuff are there. But I think the kids are really starting to settle in and figure out that, Youth Sunday is the day about us, where we can show what our passion is for God. And they're really starting to develop that hunger, which is what I love to see in the kids. But they're great though.
Nice. And you have Youth Sundays once a month?
Once a month, second Sunday.
Give me second Sunday. Cool.
Yep.
Shonda, how about you? I don't know if you're the youth leader, but I know you work with youth and you do some worship leading there. So why don't you just kind of tell us a little bit about what's that like at Alpha and Omega?
Yeah, I'm not the youth leader, but I am a part of the youth department or youth group. So just kind of leading in that space. But we don't currently have like a youth worship team or a youth choir. We used to, but now we're in the process of just developing their knowledge right now. A lot of our youth are very inquisitive. So they have a lot of questions about what things are. So why do we do certain things? How are we doing it? So we're really in the process of building connections, trying to figure out what we can do to engage them more, what they're interested in. So right now it's just kind of just having conversations with them, being intentional about listening to the questions that they have, being intentional about listening to their needs as well. A lot of them are going through a lot of like, not adult things, but like Jalen said, they're dealing with real issues, with real things that are going on. So we're just trying to make sure that we're there for them in that. And like I said, making sure that we have conversations, listening to their questions because they have a lot of them.
Yeah. All right. Go ahead, Leah.
Yeah, just to echo a few of the things that Shonda and Jalen said, it just hit me now. I kind of thought about it before, but most of our youth have grown up in the church. They've been there since they were babies. And so now I think it's like a transitional period where they're becoming more than, it's not just for show. It's not just, oh, they're cute. And so I think it's becoming they're starting to actually understand worship, and even the congregation is perceiving it as worship and not necessarily entertainment or just performance. Also, this year, we kind of just started trying to implement kind of what Jalen was saying, making Youth Sunday. Like, we want to see who you are. We want to see how you express worship. But of course, that kind of got put on pause. But I'm really excited for when we come back because there's a lot of big things planned. But so just in that transitional phase where like making sure they are comfortable and they understand and like it's okay, and also pushing past what they see, or even not even pushing past what they see from the praise team, the adult praise team, and also what they see, the responses from the congregation, reminding them that it's not about responses, like that doesn't push you, but I think that affects them sometimes. So just kind of developing that area. But they are very awesome. They're silly. Yeah, they're cool. I like them.
Yeah, they are. I'm going to stay with you right now, Leah, because you pointed out something about an idea or something that you're implementing that you started this year. And my next question was, what are some ways that we can make worship relevant for youth today? You know, and not just in the Black church, not just the white church, but churches, youth all around the world. You know, let's even consider what we're facing right now, this pandemic we're facing. Like, you know, what is the response? What is our response as young people? What should they be looking forward to? And I think Shonda mentioned they have questions. You know, so how can we make worship, just in general, how can we make it relevant to these youth and young adults today? Because when we come out of this, are we going to go back to our normal schedules? Are we still going to put them back up to sing? And what would they have to say about this? And that was one of the reasons why I really wanted to do this session today. Is it's like, what are our young people thinking about this? And I teach at Potter's House, I teach at Calvin, and I meet with my students every week, and some of their thoughts and their concerns are real. And I'm just like, wow, this is legit. And they have so much more in them besides just logging on to a Zoom for school every day. There's so much more inside of them. And so we're leaders. How can we pull that out? And what are some ways we can make worship relevant to youth today? Go ahead, Leah.
Yeah, just to go off of that. So I think one of the first steps that we're taken was just kind of asking them what they view as worship and kind of getting their thoughts on how they express worship, and also tying that into some current things in life. So some of them are, going into college, or some of them watch March Madness. So one of the things we were going to implement was like, hey, let's get the whole church involved in like where your college and university thing. I think that also allows them to see the congregation differently as well. Like, hey, we're not completely different. I think a lot of times we're looked down on as youth as being radical and just so far off that you can't come to where we are. So I think something as small as just like attire really allows them to see and puts them in a place of not authority, but just like, hey, we matter, what we have to say matter, how we feel matter, our voice matters. Yeah. So little steps like that. Even something like, I know it's like a lot of churches shy away from it, but the lights and just setting the atmosphere, I think the lights kind of help them not, like one of the issues was, I'm looking at my aunt in the congregation and she's just staring at me as I'm leading worship. But if the lights are out, I can't see her. And so I'm like, I'm tuned in and I'm focusing. So just little things like that. And just connecting, like asking questions, getting to know. I think that was something that I had to learn, getting to know the youth like that I'm leading. Yeah, getting to know them, seeing what's like what are they thinking about, what are they going through. And even now, so we do Zoom calls. We just actually had a Zoom call tonight and kind of just fellowship a little bit. We do devotional. So just getting to know them, seeing their thoughts, and being available, I think, is another important piece. Being available for those questions and for those answers. And even, which is really hard for me, even being able to say, hey, I don't have answers, but I'm willing to seek those answers with you. So
that's good.
Yeah, those are kind of my thoughts.
That's good. It's okay to say you don't have the answer either. So that's good.
Yeah, because I'm growing too. I'm like 5 years older, 5, 6, 7 years older than them. So, I'm learning and growing with them, and just being okay with that and not feeling like you have to have it all together, and letting them see that you don't have to have it all together. So,
yeah, that's good. What about you, Jalen? What ways we can make worship relevant to youth today?
Man, I think Leah hit on a lot of great points. I think one thing that we have to do as leaders for youth is firstly create a sense of belonging to them. And, that means do the students feel that they have like a physical space, if it's a room or just an area where they can express themselves and be free to talk and be authentic. I think authenticity is a really big thing, and even our generation, but especially the next generation, because just like Leah said, most people think of youth as being really radical and out of the box, But at the same time, you know, you look at some of these big mega conferences, Passion, and, you know, a lot of these have 15,000, 20,000 youth that are the same age, you know, attending these conferences. So really, you know, youth are more so drawn to following Jesus than they are really being in church.
Yeah.
And I think that's the bridge that we have to, we kind of have to bridge that gap as leaders, because they've seen a lot of things, whether, you know, adults realize it or not. Youth are smart. They pick up on, you know, a lot of unintentional cues and stuff like that in church. So we just have to create like a sense of belonging for them, so they can, you know, kind of develop their relationship with Christ and have like an accountability partner and somebody that they can trust and be open with, you know, to sharing with some of the issues and stuff that they're dealing with. And, you know, once we create that sense of belonging and authenticity, then their passion and their zeal for Christ will expand in turn, I think. So that's the main thing I would say.
That's real good. That's real good. Somebody put in the comments, what is the cutoff age for a person being considered youth or young adult?
99.
Right.
It varies.
I think it varies, yeah, from church to church. So I believe ours, but even in that, so our youth choir has a cutoff, but we also have a group of youth and young adults that cuts off at 35. So it just varies, but specifically for our youth choir, cutoff is 24.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's around what ours is too. I think it's 12 to 20.
Pastor William McDowell, they're having a conference, youth and young adult conference. But it's going to be online now, but it was young adult from, I think it was 18 to 35.
Yeah. And so then it's like, it varies. Oh, I'm not going to go into that. We can let Shonda answer your question.
Yeah, but go ahead, Shonda. What are some things?
Answer. No, I'm kidding. I think two things come to mind when it comes to making worship or even just church relevant to youth. The first thing is not forgetting that they're there. I think oftentimes we kind of put them into like these boxes of youth Sundays or these boxes of youth huddles, or just making certain pockets for them versus making it a full experience for them, just like we do with everybody else. So I think it's important also, so this is the second thing, to teach them like the whys of what we do. Oftentimes we tell youth what not to do. So don't do this, don't do that, or do this, do that, versus telling them why. And I think now is a really good time to really be intentional about sitting down with our young people, teaching them the whys of what we do, especially when it comes to worship, because we can tell them like, this is the place where you lift your hands, or this is the place where you bow to the Lord, but why do we lift our hands? Why do we bow to him? So then when it comes back into the place where we can re-engage them, we can put them back into the atmosphere of worship or just into our culture in general, they won't look at it as a requirement. Like, I'm required to bow here, I'm required to lift my hands here. They'll look at it like it's something that they're doing from their heart. It makes it more personal versus a requirement. So I think that's how we make it relevant, not forgetting that they're there, but also really teaching them, giving them the knowledge of why we do what we do.
That's really good, because I'm sorry, Nate. Just thinking about the why. When I didn't know why, I was confined to a certain location. So I only did it within that location because I was told to do it within that location, not understanding why I was doing it in that location. So that's pretty powerful. So like in times like this, when we're not at that location, do we know the why, and are we able to go back to that why? That was good.
Yeah, because in times like this, we're not in the building. So what do they do now on second Sundays, or what do they do on fourth Sundays? You know, I was going to say, when Shonda was talking about something about the why, you know, the why, I remember getting scolded many times, not by my parents, but from church leaders, when I was that 8-year-old, that 10-year-old, that 12-year-old asking questions in church. And back to my first question, I knew I was called to do this at a young age. I would have dreams. A lot of the things that that I'm doing now today in ministry, I dreamt them years ago. And I remember waking my parents up, and I had this dream. I was standing in front of a choir, and I had this dream. I was standing in front of a large group of people, and they all looked different. And I didn't know how to navigate that. I knew it was a calling, but I also had questions. Well, why do we do this in church? Because it really don't really line up, So, and not to slam anybody, not to slam any churches or anything, but I was that kid who had a lot of questions, and I was always inquisitive. I was always the kid I was the church boy. I didn't know how to do anything different. That's just what I was called to do. And now it's obvious that I'm doing what I was supposed to do. But I remember being that kid asking, why? And so have you guys encountered kids or youth or youth in your spaces like that?
Not really. Just going back on what I said earlier, a lot of them grew up in the church, so they kind of got most of that foundation when they were during their time there, and they're kind of now just applying it or really being intentional about it. So not really that I can remember or think of for me.
Rashida Johnson says, I wonder if there is value in asking them what feels organic in worship to them, so that we aren't teaching people more how than why. I wonder if I read that right.
One more time. Where is it?
Here we go. Somebody was typing as I was reading, it was moving. I wonder if there's value in asking them what feels organic in worship to them, so that we aren't teaching people more how than why. Rashida Johnson. That's good. Mama Cece, the church needs to get into what is going on with the youth. I agree with Chandra.
Is that what I say? Yes,
God, Chandra.
I agree with Shonda. Instead of ordering them to do, but teaching them why is important. It is important that we don't bring the "because I told you so" mentality. That is so true. The do as I said, not as I do type. That's a whole nother generational term and generational experience that don't really work no more. Not that we have a lot of youth that want to be disobedient, but they just want to know.
Yeah, and I can speak to that one. We definitely have some youth that just want to know, and also I feel like it's important for us as leaders, as we usher in the new generation of church. I'm talking 15, 20 years down the line. We have to create opportunities for them to develop competence. And what I mean by that is, like, how many of our students know what their talents and spiritual gifts are? And what can we do to help them nurture that, or identify what their gifts and abilities are? Are they using them? Also, we have to create, spaces and outlets for them to display their gifts. And it may not look like what we're used to, but, I think that's why it's very important to have, youth explosion nights and that type of thing, because that may look like a rap or poetry or maybe a painting or something. It may not look like what we're used to, but we have to create those opportunities for them to express themselves, because I believe God will begin to reveal to them what their, calling is in ministry. So
everybody don't have to sing in the choir.
Exactly.
Right. Yep.
Somebody might be creative that they want to take photos. I'm going to pick on Eric, Allayah's husband, Eric LaShaunda. Like, he sang in the choir. I remember him being a child. He sang in the choir, but he always was good with his hands. He wanted to do something with his hands. So he would be in the choir. And then the next year, he's on the instruments. He played the saxophone. He played the trumpet. But it seemed like he was never satisfied there. Then he went to taking pictures and doing videos and doing the soundboard. And now look what he's doing now. It's obvious what his area of creativity was. But I also know he probably was also trying to find, he was in an atmosphere or an environment to where he could pick and choose what he wanted to do until he finally landed what he wanted to do. And I think having a good environment to where the young people can flourish, and not just throw them all in the choir. What if somebody, like you said, they might want to paint, let them paint. You can do art and worship as well. That's a whole nother conversation.
Yep.
I think sometimes we underestimate them. Like, we don't take into account that they know what they want to do, and they know their interests. They know what interests them and what doesn't. But sometimes we don't, like I said, we don't have conversations with them, and we're not asking them questions. We're expecting them to come to us. Well, I want to do this and I want to do that, versus really being open to asking them their interests, because they know, and we can't underestimate the fact that they know what they want to do.
Good. I got a question for the listening audience. If you work with youth currently, why don't you throw up a thumbs up emoji? If you work with youth, the emoji, so I can kind of get a tally of how many. And what we're going to talk about is how can we encourage the adult who's responsible for children or youth ministry. That could go from, just how to deal with them. It's a different generation, like Jalen said, it's a different generation. Finding songs. How do you keep them engaged? How do you keep them smiling? I stepped in a few rehearsals sometimes and they looking like, but like, what do you do? Like, how to keep them? So if you're working, I see you, Rashida. If you're working with youth and just kind of give us a thumbs up emoji so we can kind of touch on this real quick. How to deal with youth, and you can even kind of go a little bit outside of maybe in your personal career. I know LaShaunda works at Pre-Destined and Boys and Girls Club and things like that. And Allayah has a business with her husband, Eric Savvy. You guys are working with youth and you're inviting people at Carbon, young people. So what are some ways that you can keep them engaged in youth ministry or in worship? And I know this conversation isn't about young youth and young adult departments. I still want to keep it in the context of worship as well. So who wants to go first? I didn't give a person to go first. Go ahead, Jalen.
Okay.
So the adult who's responsible for these young people.
Yeah. I definitely think the onus is on us to find a sense of meaning for kids. And I think from a spiritual aspect, it's important for us being adults to, regularly share what our faith journeys and things are, and being transparent with them and sharing how we search for meaning in scripture, and how relevant is the teaching in our ministries compared to what the kids are going through in everyday life, and just having those transparent conversations with them, and just using discernment. Sometimes I work with youth all the time in church, and also I'm like a program coordinator for Michigan State Extension, so I do like after school programming. And sometimes you walk into a session or a programming opportunity, and you do notice that kids are feeling kind of down. The character of kids when you are around them all the time, and you can tell when something's off. And sometimes it's important to maybe stop the lesson plan at that moment and just kind of get a gauge of the room, how people are feeling, maybe open up the table for discussion and open dialogue. And that creates a sense of trust with kids, I think. And it's important to, kind of create those spaces for kids, because they're more receptive when you do want to teach new songs and stuff like that, or you want to go in new directions. They feel more trustworthy to go in that direction with you when you've built that trust bond with them. Yeah.
Did you say allow them to choose songs?
No, but I definitely think they can make suggestions for sure. Especially as kids.
I was saying, he said they definitely can make suggestions.
Suggestions.
Yeah, suggestions. But
Right.
but yeah, I do like as kids kind of mature, especially like the kids that are 16, 17, 18, they kind of have deeper relationships with Christ compared to some of the younger kids. And I definitely take song suggestions and stuff like that all the time. It's important to also, like, if you're discipling or training kids, give them a sense of responsibility, and that will make them want to be in church, because they're like, okay, I actually have a role, something that I'm in charge of doing or helping or assisting with. Having that sense of responsibility is definitely a plus, I think, with you.
Sherelle says, meet them where they are. For example, I'm on iPhone games with them right now. Tell them to get on this Facebook Live.
Get on this live.
Go ahead.
Right. Why would you?
Go ahead, Leah.
All of it. Jalen said all of that, and even what Sherelle said, meeting them where they are. Because I had learned it this way, I kind of was putting off what I learned. It was when I was in choir, it was very like, oh, you chewing gum? Get out. Are you not singing? Stand up by yourself and sing it by yourself and all that stuff. So I kind of had to relearn and just work with them and kind of meeting them where they are. Like everything doesn't deserve a yelling and all of that stuff, kind of basically meeting them where they are and being patient, I think has been very helpful. Nate kind of experienced that earlier this year with me, just being patient and remembering the why and also reminding them of the why, if they know the why, and or helping them understand the why, and then also reminding them, like sometimes we'll be in rehearsal and they kind of get a little sidetracked or they don't seem as enthusiastic, and so I kind of say, hey, like, you do know this is worship, right? We have lives.
Maddie Moss on them one time.
Right. Come on, shoot. I know, I'm kidding.
That's what I said.
Cats.
People are depending on us to kind of lead them into worship, and in order to do that, we have to know what we're singing. We have to believe what we're singing, and I think once again, going back on their upbringing specifically for our group, that kind of convicts them, like, hey, yeah, I shouldn't be doing this, or this is important, and I should be focused and tuned in because this is my calling. It all ties together. This is my calling. I know the why, so I'm going to think about that, and I should take it more serious. And maybe now's not the time. I can do that after or in between. So
yeah, and even for those young people who may say this isn't a calling for me, but I'm a part of it. I'm committed to it. I'm serving. They can look at it as an act of service in the house of the Lord. Go ahead, LaShaunda.
That's so funny. You guys said a good bulk of it, but I saw a post, I can't remember when it was, but it said connect before you correct. But I think that comes with connecting before you do anything. So in everything that we said is just connecting with them. Like you said, connecting with them where they are, connecting with them outside of just the youth Sundays, outside of, like I said, just those pockets of time that we devote to youth. Like it should be a full experience for them, just like it is for anybody else. And I think that's so important in youth ministry, just to make sure that we're giving them the full experience, because so many times we focus so much on adults, like this is what we're doing Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday for you, but what do we have for youth during the week? What do we have for them to connect with them so that they feel more engaged and more connected on a Sunday? So yeah, just connecting.
That's good. One thing I did with my high school students, I teach about 22 of them. And when the pandemic started, or the quarantine started, I asked them on our Google Hangout call, I was like, give me a high, give me a low. And it's always like, the highs are always like, well, I thank God I'm alive. But the lows are like, bam, 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 bam. Yeah. There's more lows than highs. So I gave them the responsibility of go in the scripture, find a song related to how you're feeling. And then I want you to write a devotion and encourage someone else. And so they got that responsibility. And now they, since it is a music course, I also gave them the option of creating their own song through it. So some of them actually wrote music and wrote songs related to the song that they chose. And now they have, in these next few weeks of school, when we meet every week, they present it to their fellow classmates as a presentation. And I said all that to say, giving them that responsibility of, hey, you're totally legit in your feelings right now. You're for real. It's the truth. I agree with you, but now let's put on our opportunity to serve someone else, minister to someone else, and share with them the importance of worship leading. And that's an act of service. So the word that's synonymous to worship is service. So I tell them, now let's serve our classmates. And let's put on the hat of being teachers and worship teachers. And so let's dig into the Psalms. And now they got that opportunity to basically lead worship on Google Hangout every week. And so some of them will sing. We'll all mute our computers and they'll sing to us. Some of them play their guitar, and some of them will just read something that they wrote. Or one girl said, I changed this into like my own poem, but it's based off Psalm 91. And so it's amazing to watch them go forth with that. And I think trust is also a factor, letting them know that, hey, I trust you, but in order for me to trust you, I also gotta spend some time pouring into them. So once I pour into them, then I gotta let them know, hey, I trust you to go ahead and carry it out. I see potential in you, go ahead and carry it out. And so that's one thing that I learned about leading youth and young adults. I don't know why I've always been passionate about youth and young adults. And here I am getting old, I'm getting up there. I'm getting up there. Like, up there. But that calling is still strong. And I say, God, I'm yet holding on until it is. But
holding on.
Yeah, holding on until yeah. What are some? I'm trying to think. What were some? Do you remember a time where there was a struggle for you, or a moment of victory for you? Maybe when you were in that moment of leading worship in that younger age, and it might be something we already touched on, or maybe if there's a personal experience you want to share. What was a struggle? I'll go first to give you some time to think. I remember leading worship right out of college. I was around this, group of friends, and I talked with Kenny Henderson a couple weeks ago. We touched a little bit about this, but I remember being at that age of wanting to know more about God and wanting to lead worship and dive into books in the Bible about worship leading. And I'm so young, but I get to lead this congregation of people. 50% of them actually like 80% of them are older than me. But I remember one time I got up and I was just fussing at them, just fuss for no reason. I knew this much about the Bible. Didn't know much about theology, didn't know much about song lyrics. I was just going off of something that I saw somebody else do. So another conversation, sometimes we try to duplicate what we see, and it don't always work. So, but I was going off of just trying to duplicate what somebody else did. And I remember saying, man, y'all dead. Anything dead should be buried.
My gosh.
Talk about disaster. Yeah, it was bad. It was bad. And so, but it was also a learning moment for me. I probably had to be like 19 or 20. It was bad. It was really, really, really bad. So that was a struggle of mine. It was trying to duplicate something that I saw and not really building that personal relationship with God myself. But that whole anything that's there should be buried, because I came from a church that was everything was power Lord, strong, praise him, crush the devil, crush the devil. That was just everything. And so when I moved to Grand Rapids and got to Grace, it was like, y'all dead, come on, lift your hands. You dead, you sure dead. You need Jesus. You not saved. This young dude up in here trying to tell these folks who've been in church forever what they need to be doing. Right. So I had to scale all the way back, and I said, Lord, I still got the mic in my hand. I said, Lord, teach me. I said, Lord, teach me how to lead your people. These are your people. These are your people. Teach me how to lead your people. And ever since then, I had to humble myself under his mighty hand and allow him to lead me. So what were some of your struggles, or if there are any struggles, or what were some of your victories, struggles or victories?
I could go next. Nate, we are brothers because I have a very similar experience. So when I got
all right, I'll break the news to you, Jalen.
If you did.
My dad.
Right. We got right. Are you two guys?
Listen, so I got to Michigan State in 2010. And Michigan State had a gospel chorale when I got there. So cutting to the chase, my sophomore year, I got appointed. Some of you you guys know Tyrone Foster, and some of the people on the live may
Shout
know
out to Tyrone.
but he was directing Michigan State's gospel choir at the time, and he appointed me. He was graduating and leaving to be the next director of the gospel choir. So at this time, I'm 19 years old, and I'm now directing an 85 person choir, 80 to 85 people, and 90% of them are older than me. 21, 22 seniors, and I'm a sophomore. And I struggled with that thing the first couple of months because I had to learn how to gauge, all of these different personalities, still, maintain a grip on leading the ministry and being like the face of the ministry. And I directed for probably 4 or 5 years. But like that first year, I definitely had like a proud spirit. I was cutting into people. Like, okay, let me hear this part. Yep, that's the reason you on the third row. Let's be quiet. Like, dude, I was struck. I'm a 19-year-old kid. People giving me attitude and lip and stuff, and I had to navigate that thing. And also, really, that year, my sophomore into junior year, I developed my relationship with God more than any other year in my life because God had to really show me how to deal with people and lots of people. And I really developed my interpersonal skills and just working with people and learning how to communicate effectively and still kind of be respected. I always felt like I had to gain people's respect, being a younger person in the choir, but being like at the head of the leadership. And like there was like a council and a leadership of e-board and staff and all that type of stuff. Like it was a legit like ministry. And that was a struggle for me. Just really dying to my flesh and saying, God, how do you want me to lead your people? What songs do you want us to sing? How should I communicate this idea effectively? How can I be, always being in the serve mindset? So that was really my struggle. And I think God used that time to really develop who I am as a worship leader and stuff now. Now I don't have a problem, communicating with people, being in large groups, speaking before large groups and that type of thing, because I was really, honed and crafted and nurtured, during my time in college, being over such a large body of believers and Christians, but still dealing with my own issues as a 19-year-old and, still having to go to class, still balancing, work, class, choir. So it was a big deal.
Yeah. I would say mine's happened less off the stage. It was more internal. And it was maybe 4 or 5 years ago. It was more recent for me because I found myself being just really angry and attitudinal with everybody. Like I had an attitude and an anger problem, but I didn't know what it was. I'm like, what is this? I don't act like this. Who is this person? But I realized that it was because, like I said,
right,
I have been like just pushed in the front since I was 5. And then since my father started his ministry when I was 12, so still being in the front. And I hadn't realized that I was just allowing myself to pour, but I wasn't allowing God to fill me. I wasn't allowing him to be God for me. Wow. And I realized it one day. I was leading worship, and every time it was like Sunday after Sunday, I would sit down and just feel like super empty and like, well, did I mess up here? Did I say the right thing? Did I fuss too much? And I just would beat myself up every Sunday. And I'm like, Lord, what is this? So I think one Sunday I was leading worship and I literally heard him say, let me feel you while you're pouring. So as I was leading worship and pouring out, I wasn't allowing him to be God for me. And I wasn't allowing him to feel those identity places that I needed him to feel for me. And I was just giving all of this stuff. And it was making me angry and it made me have an attitude. And I hadn't realized it until that time. So I guess that's kind of like a down and a victory at the same time. Just realizing that when I was pouring out, he was still able to fill me up, and I didn't have to give all of this without allowing him to be God for me too. Because I'm like, Lord, I'm pouring out to all these people. Some of them not responding, some of them not changing. So it just kind of made me irritated, but I had to allow him to to feel at the same time.
That's good.
I didn't have any specific instances. It was just like a growth period, but I remember being assigned over the youth, and I'm like, okay, you know, like great. I don't supposed to be here. Like what? Me? And then even in that, usually when you step into a role, for me, I look for other people that are where I want to be, or examples that I can look up to and pull from. And outside of Minister Nate, who was pulled in so many other areas, I didn't have that. So I kind of was struggled in that area. And I kind of allowed that to kind of hinder me from stepping into the role, because I was like, what am I supposed to do? Like, what does this even mean? What does this even look like?
Yeah.
What do I say to people? You know, how do I lead people? And so I think that was kind of a stumbling block. But then I just remember God telling me, like, you are the example. And so that's kind of where it kind of transitioned a little bit. So I just began to be the example, and just really thinking about, like, that kind of followed me everywhere I go, and just knowing that the youth were looking up to me to be that example that I may not have had all the time. And so it just began to affect me in just small areas, like, what am I doing 20 minutes before it's time to go in the pulpit? What am I doing after the pulpit? Like, just things like that. How am I preparing myself? What are they seeing me do? Even down to social media, like, what am I saying? What are my interactions with other people? So I think that's kind of been my area for victory and learning and just growth overall.
Yeah, you never want to be untouchable as a leader.
Yeah.
You know, allow them to touch you, allow them to talk to you, ask you questions and things. And I've seen your growth tremendously. I've seen each of you grow tremendously. So yeah, quick story with these three. I remember we just recently traveled to South Africa. I forgot what month it was.
September going into October.
And I just remember that moment of I think we were in Swaziland. Shout out to Pastor T, Pastor Timba. But I remember that moment, and I determined I'm not going to do all the leading. I'm going to spread the leading out. And I watched each of you in your capacities just lead and lead on a whole nother continent, in a whole nother nation, in front of a group of people that we've never seen before. And you guys just kind of let go. And I didn't see no fear. I didn't see no anger. I didn't see no, you bad, go sit in the back row. I just saw yielded vessels that was willing to lead God's people. And I appreciate. Shout out to Shania and Aaron as well, who was also on that trip with us. But thank you all for always being yielded and willing to go. Cause I call them like, hey, y'all want to go to Israel next week? Like, y'all want to go to Tanzania? Like, let's do it.
That's a cool way to go.
So we're already over an hour, so I don't want to go too long, but I do have one more question. Actually, I see someone posted something as well. Ivy Wilcher, although we are servants and striving to serve God's people, have you all ever felt unappreciated?
Oh man. I'll let the ladies go first.
Are you saying, Ivy, are you saying unappreciated like from the people who appointed us, or unappreciated from the people we're serving, or both?
I think I felt unappreciated from the youth, but I know why. Like, they didn't know me. There was no connection. There was a reason why. And so just figuring out the reason why, because I don't think they would do it just to do it, but they didn't understand me, and I wasn't always relating to them or trying to understand them. So of course they're not going to listen to what I have to say in choir rehearsal or so I think that was a barrier at times. Unappreciated by leadership or others, I don't really pay attention to it if it is a thing, so, or I haven't really felt it.
Chris said both of them.
Both of them.
Oh, both of them. That's funny.
I don't think I've ever felt unappreciated from leadership. I felt unappreciated, like Leah said, from youth, and it probably was because they didn't know me, and it was kind of like, here's another leader. But it took, and I saw Evan posted something earlier about relationship. It takes that relationship building. You got to build that bridge When I tell my high schoolers this now. I say, when y'all first met me, y'all hated me. I was like Mr. Clark on that movie, Lean on Me. Y'all know.
Joe Clark.
My first time entering into Potter's house, it was like, who is this guy? You know? And I'm not even mean. I'm just real, like, what you see is what you get. But it was like, we don't know him and we don't know you. You come to our space and those things. So I think it could have been unappreciated on the youth side of the people I led, even whether it was in church or at Calvin or other, even like Camp Judah. Like, camp is so fun, but those first couple days, you be like,
ooh, they really test you. They be like, let me see.
They will test you.
Let me see.
Test your faith and everything. Go ahead, Shonda. I think you were going to say something. Or Jalen, one of you.
Unappreciated. I think it was only because and I think I had somewhat of this conversation with Leah before. It was me. It wasn't the kids. So I felt like they didn't appreciate me, but only because they weren't responding in a way that I felt like they should. So I expected them all to mirror what I would do. So I'm like, if I was your age, then I would be excited about this. Or if I was your age, then I would love this. But I had to realize that they weren't me, and I couldn't expect them to act like me. And like, I couldn't put them in a mirror of me, because we're all different people and we all receive different things in different ways. So I think that was the only reason why I've ever felt unappreciated. And it was because people didn't respond in a way that I expected them to, versus me just being receptive to how they did respond. So if that answers the question.
Yeah, you can't make people do stuff that you don't want, that they don't want to do. You can't make them do stuff. You got to shout out Namsa. Namsa! Hey guys from South Africa. I just wanted to say you guys were awesome. I really enjoyed your ministry. It was great having you over here. You were supposed to be in South Africa, what was it, 2 weeks ago, Jalen?
April.
Yeah.
Jalen and I was supposed to be in South Africa 2 weeks ago live recording actually. And because of everything.
I know why y'all not there, because me and Shonda couldn't go.
See, look at God. So it's being postponed to later this year. So Jalen, did you have anything for that question about underappreciated?
Yeah, really quick. Mine is very similar to LaShaunda's. I think I felt unappreciated by the youth because I was expecting them to be more similar to me. And also because being a leader with college age people that are grown is vastly different than being a leader of 13 to 18-year-olds, you know? So I had to learn to lead each person uniquely, you know? And I would, at the beginning, I would create these standards and rules, and that just applies to everybody. But I had to learn to kind of customize my approach with the youth individually.
Good.
You know, this youth doesn't respond to, you know, harsh teaching or just kind of coming down on them a little bit about notes and stuff, because I expect, you know, excellence out of them, but I try to do it in love. But I had to learn to kind of customize that for every youth uniquely and individually. So.
Yeah. Kendra says, I'm not reading that.
Boy.
I'm not reading that.
She right, kind of. She said that's why we ain't got one.
Oh,
95.5%.
My God.
You hear from Johannesburg, 1 Timothy 4:12. I was going to read this. Let no man look down on you in your youth, but be an example and conduct and love, in faith and in purity. Allayah stepping into scary waters when I was appointed as the head of the music ministry. Yeah. Oh, he's sharing his own testimony. Yeah. So I hope this was inspiring to you all, those who are tuning in some type of way. I hope there was something that was said that you can take back to your youth, or something that you can embrace as we're quarantining. So when we go back, in whatever way we go back, that you have some type of strategy, or you can always reach out to any one of us for more things. I mean, this is a great conversation. I know our church, Grace for the Nations, they're going to be having, our youth leaders are going to be doing a panel similar to this in a couple weeks. But it won't be centered around worship. It'll just be centered around youth ministry in general. So they'll be covering a whole bunch of other things as well. So you all stay tuned for that. My last question, we're going to go ahead and head out, what would you say to the next generation? What would you say to to this generation or the next generation? It could be one summative statement, but think about, and by way of discipling others, think about, leaving a legacy. What is one thing you would say to the next generation? Or maybe think of the people you're leading. What is one thing you would say to them?
I'll go. Eric had said this to me a couple of days, and I've heard it before, but I was kind of focused on, I was responding to someone, not in the way that I should have responded, but based on how they had responded to me. And he was just like, God ain't gonna ask you what they did for you, what they did to you. He gonna ask you, he gonna look at what you did. So really draw close to God and kind of let that guide you and lead you in your decisions and your choices. That's pretty much the bigger picture of it. And think about what you want him to say when he like what you want, how you want him to view you and kind of respond to you, and think about what he'll say based on your choices. I think because he has defined himself, he's the ultimate decider. So even though people in the congregation looking at you as you leading worship and just standing there, that don't really matter. So in all, that's just like the bigger picture for me. That's something I would share.
Or even the people that you lead might be looking at you like that.
Yeah, and you like, come on, we are blessed,
right.
you know. So that's one thing off the top of my head.
That's good. Even with Mama Cece, what do you do when you're ready to quit? There have been times I wanted to quit, but I always remember the assignment. I've been assigned to something, not just church, but also other areas of my life, just wanting to quit. What is your assignment? And I posted something, or Pastor Jermone posted something yesterday, and I reposted it. It said, remember why you started, or something like that. Never forget why you started.
Yeah.
Never forget why you started. And I have to always keep that in mind. If I'm only thinking about man or these people that I'm leading, then I will never fulfill the God-given assignment.
You be quitting everything.
Everything. Moses kept failing because he kept seeing the people. And God kept reminding him, remember what I told you. First of all, you the only one that get to go up on these mountains. You the only one that get to see my backside. You the only one I'm talking to. And you gonna let these folks build their own calf because
I'm about to run.
They want to talk to God too,
Run.
It's like, I've chosen you.
Yeah.
Remember your assignment. Never forget why you started. I love that quote.
Side note, I feel like that's just like a common thread lately. Because it just reminded me of Jonathan McReynolds' new song, People. Yeah. I feel like that's so common right now. Just letting people dictate our choices and our actions.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Don't let anyone drive you to quit, because once you're done, they're gonna try to take your position.
Snatch it right from under you.
Right. I'm glad he gone. Now it's my turn. Don't fulfill the assignment that was given to you. I think of me. I want to quit school. I'm still here.
that sounded like a hurtful laugh. Like,
I know.
Right.
Oh,
Lord.
Hang in there. Remember the assignment.
But before I forget, I did have something pertaining to leaving a legacy and what I would share with youth. Something that's been kind of resonating with me the last couple months. I heard, I think somebody preached it in the message, but it was simply do it afraid. And, it doesn't matter what it is. Many, youth and kids have dreams, aspirations. They have gifts and talents and stuff, but they're just afraid to share it because they think a little too much on what their peers might think, what their parents might think. Whatever it is, if you think you have a songwriting ability, or you play an instrument or something, or you want to sing, but you've never really sung in front of people, do it afraid. Just start doing it, and God will take care of the rest. God will build up your courage, and he will send you the people that need to help you and nurture you to bring your gift out. Yeah. So do it afraid, and live with integrity. That's important.
That's good.
And don't yell at people.
Right, Jalen. I hope you throw them.
Jalen.
I mean, they were grown though. They weren't kids. They 20-some-year-old people. But y'all don't understand. It's a lot of people.
All right, Sandra.
I would say, I think the biggest thing is know who you are, and know that we need who you are. So there's a lot in you that we'll need you to do so that the future is substantial, so that the future has meaning. So we need you to be who you are.
Good.
Especially now during this pandemic, if you look at, like, we need technology more than ever before. And there are young people who know how to do things that we don't know how to do. Well, know how to do things that I don't know how to do.
That's all right.
I think that just speaks to the generation after us, and even our generation, just how relevant we are. So again, just know who you are, be who you are, implement who you are, so that we can benefit from that.
Yeah.
Let me write that down.
Right, I'm gonna. No.
Ooh.
Simba, remember.
Show them who you are.
Right. T'Challa.
This is good. Y'all got some people y'all want to shout out who've helped you on this journey from youth to now?
Shout out to Nate Glasper.
What?
100%.
Shout out to Nate Glasper. You are a great impact on
Praise the Lord.
worship leading in general, not just me, but the community of worship leaders and what worship is and what worship looks like. So thank you for even doing this and inviting me and us. We appreciate it.
God be the glory.
Yeah.
What about Mama Cece? Mama Cece on here.
Oh yeah, shout out to Mama Cece.
She's helped us.
For sure.
Shout out to my boys.
She taught me how to be a soprano.
Oh, taught you how to be a soprano. Shout out to Tyrone Foster and my
Tyrone.
Rule. They were like my road dogs, and they kind of groomed me into, what worship was, and taught me how to be, in front of people more, like at the college level. The year before I took over, like, I was with Tyrone. That's part of the reason why I go to Lansing Kojic. It's because Tyrone was worship leader at Lansing Kojic, and he was kind of molding me into being the next director. And also Will was the other director when I was directing. So shout out to those two guys for being in my corner and helping me out.
Awesome. I would say, I kind of mentioned it already, but shout out to my parents just for setting that foundation that I can stand on even until today. And then as far as like pushing and platforms and things like that, my brother, Lucius, for sure. Both of my brothers actually in worship leading and in ministry have pushed me. I think that's it. Yeah.
Nice. I think I would say it's so many people, even people from like my childhood. I think for sure my pastors, Pastor Terrence, Lady Eva LaShaunda, my music teacher from high school, who I have like a close relationship today. We're like friends. It's kind of weird because when you were little, you're a kid, you're like, yeah, this is my teacher. But now I'm like, hey, what's up, man? What you up to? But he's still like out. He's a pastor. His name is Jalen in Muskegon, Michigan.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, still doing his thing. Like he don't even look like he's ever aged. But he really inspired me to pursue music education. But I've always been passionate with young youth and young adult ministry. I knew that calling was there. So I always wanted to merge the two. Lord, how do I merge the two? And so shout out to him. Shout out to, again, Cassandra Carter. Oh, I met her going to college. And then there's a college choir. And then Dr. Charcy Sawyer, which was also that bridge for the academic of it. So you got all of these components, all these puzzle pieces have joined together. And I'm great. And the ministry piece. And that's where Pastor LaShaunda comes in and Grace for the Nations. And all of the experiences I had with worship leading came through Pastor LaShaunda. Even the traveling overseas, that door opened through Vincent Matthews, Bishop Vincent Matthews, who's the Kojic International Missions President. But he invited us in 2013 to come. And because of him, we've been Swaziland, Cape Town, South Africa, Joburg, South Africa, all of these places, Dr. Sawyer, South Korea, all these avenues, Guatemala. have opened because of yielding under someone's leadership. So young people, I remember being teenager under these people's leadership, never feeling the need to overstep, but always feeling the need to yield, listen, take it in, receive, no matter whether you're 19, 20, 21, 30, 35, 45, we're all called to serve someone. Who can you serve? And as you're serving them, be open. LaShaunda was talking about being poured into. Allow God to use those individuals to pour into you. And then you'll be surprised to where you'll go from that. And then always think of who can I disciple? Don't be in your 60s and 70s. I can't say that because I've never been 16, 70. Don't be in your 20s and 30s, like always complaining about what you don't have. You know, what can you disciple? Who can you disciple? Who can you pour into? And who can you help to take to that next level? Just like someone took you or is taking you, you reach back and grab somebody and you start taking them as well. And so that's kind of what
my mom told me. There's somebody waiting on your yes. Mom told me that when I was young. There's somebody waiting on you to say yes. What God has called you to do.
Yep. I learned that, you know, even with starting camp, I started Camp Judah because someone poured into me and I said, I want to pour into somebody else. A whole plethora of young people, because I felt what I had was so valuable and I didn't want to do it all myself. I started pulling people, pulling my friends. Hey, y'all help me run this camp. Help me teach this class. Help me. And that's what it's all about. That's what I believe. That's what it's like about. That's what it's about in my world. That's how I look at it. So, yes, I'm grateful for that. All right. It is 8:51. We've been on this thing for almost an hour and a half.
I like it.
Yeah, this was fun.
I enjoyed myself.
Good time.
What time you for dinner today? Let's get
Bye, bye.
All right. Thank you all for tuning in to Worship Conversation. Next week, I don't even know the title, so we're still working on it. So I'm not even going to be trying to throw stuff out there.
It's all right.
Peace out. You got any last thing you want to say?
Love you, Mom and Dad.
Y'all download my new single, You Are Great, this Friday.
Yeah.
This Friday.
Excited about that.
Now let's pray that they come out for Friday for real, though.
Bye.
Peace out, everybody. Love you.
Bye.